So, this game 7 was pretty crazy, I'm not gonna lie. There were so many things happening on this west side of the map, especially, that was like really interesting. So that's what I'm gonna go through today. I'm just gonna go through loads of different teams' POVs, go through from zone 2 onwards, all the way through to the end of the game, and just kind of explain how Reject ended up winning, pretty much. So, first POV, we're gonna have a look at a DZ little rotate here. They do their normal late rotate from Sky West into countdown. They're going to rotate once they get perps, which they already have. Going to hit the BDS player beacon. Going to recognize this as a hard clamor zone. Then, so this is really important. So they recognize it's a clamor zone. They're going to go play for the beacon in Epi and make sure if it pulls out left or right, they're in a good position to rotate either way, right? So what happens here, because of that, Aurora is in a secondary god spot. So we all understand like this spot over here is pretty much going to be god spot. Any spot that's played here later on in the game is going to have 3Ps coming from Survey or Hill House. So Aurora recognise they don't want to play in this secondary spot, and they're not used to playing in these type of secondary spots because obviously they're landing Sky East instead of Sky West. So they rotated early and are uncomfortable playing in an early rotate spot, and probably recognise that a DZ are going to come in later from Survey this side and going to come and basically fight them with a massive armor difference and just going to wipe them pretty easily there. So what Aurora do, they decide to be active on the map instead of just sitting here waiting to die to DZ. They're going to rotate out back into Sky East and they're going to rotate all the way around the map and they're going to go loot some Evo harvesters, get more loot, and then come back into the zone back, zone 3. So DZ take the zone scan in Epi. Then they're going to rotate over to carts where Aurora just left from. Then they recognize there's one fight for the win. They're going to try and force the fight onto E8 into their RV spot. One thing that DZ does really well is they're always willing to force the fight onto god spots to win their games, right? Here, they anticipate the teams inside Clamor are not going to leave to 3P this fight because it's too congested inside Clamor, so if one team goes, the other team's going to get shot in the back, etc, etc. They can't really leave because they're all in committed spots inside Clamor, right? So DZ are really good because they have a core principle of these sort of like ideology, you know? They have the ideology of if we're in a scenario where we can play for the fight to win the game, they are going to play for the fight to win the game every time. If they're not in a situation where they can play to fight to win the game, they're going to obviously do whatever whatever their other principles are correctly, right? So the main premise obviously is they're going to play for the highest reward fights possible, right? And in this scenario, the highest reward fight is the fight onto the EA arbitrary. Here we can see DZ trying to force the fight onto E8. This fight ends up stalling for a solid minute, allowing loads of other teams to recognize the fight's happening. Obviously, what ends up happening actually is Clamor teams, obviously, as I said before, cannot come and 3P this because it's so congested inside Clamor and their committed spots. So what ends up happening is the team from Hill House, all the way from Hill House, looks and it starts peeking and gets info out. They see the 3P opportunity. They see E8 and DZ forcing the fight, and Reject are the ones that rotate all the way around and come and go for the 3P. And this is why this is a really good example of teams that understand the macro meta pretty much. So out of all the teams inside Clamor, there's only one team that's on match point right now. Every other match point team is outside of Clamor. So that's a really good like idea of like how teams like the gap between like actual teams that understand the macro and teams that just go for the spots that are close to zone 1, zone 2 touching and just go with that. They don't fully, they don't fully understand the macro meta like completely. So Reject end up going to come 3P this. They do recognize there's a team. Ends up being DSG. There is a team coming behind from Survey. You'll see Karen P. See them there. But then they decide to commit anyway. Really good call. Just be decisive. Super decisive. Don't try and think, oh, the team behind me, is this going to work? Is this not going to work? No point in doing that in the game 8 finals. Just go decisive and make your action play. Here we can see obviously DZ finally take the fight, finally get the entry, end up dying. I think they do win the fight in the end, but they get a 3P actually from SSG from playing on the outside of the donut, and then the reject come in a clean SSG. I get the 2 knocks in SSG, and they end up having control of Godspot. Obviously, it's a pretty stable win from here on out, but there was quite a few situations where they could have been in a worse situation, but they got quite lucky about what other teams' decisions helped them out quite a lot. Here's a quick little recap of Aurora's zones shenanigans. They go all the way to get this harvester, and there's also a harvester here. They come all the way back into zone, but look how long it takes. And then look at the time that they come to zone. This fight's already happening, or it's already happened, sorry, and RC's already in for the 3P. DSG's already coming up for the cart spot, and they're still in zone. A really good play for Aurora, in my opinion, in this scenario, would have been when they're in this spot to simply go into zone, maybe loot some Sky East, and go to BDS, and then come back in. I feel like if they did this with this timing, I feel like they would have beaten DSG, and they would have been in this spot before DSG, and then DSG would have had to force to play Hill House. And then obviously we'll see later on in the games, but I think if there was a Bang team playing with DSG were and it wasn't a Rave team, I think that Bang team might end up winning the game. But yeah, they end up taking way too long on the rotate. They went all the way down to get this beacon, this harvester, and it end up just taking them way too long. They're coming to zone way too late. Their spot's already gone, and then they have to end up going for Hill House. A quick little state of affairs. So Aurora in Hill House, DSG end up getting the cart spot. RC are in the winning spot. Loads and loads of congested teams inside Climber, just in committed spots. They can't pull out. Like this, after this zone, there's just all these teams are just in way too committed spots. As I talked about before, if we quickly circle some teams, right? So RC, match point, DC, I believe we're on match point, Aurora match point, Fnatic were on match point. I believe the only match point team that's actually inside the Climber was Legends. I feel like they were the only match point team that was. I'm not sure. I think Moist might be match point as well. I can't remember. But yeah, you can see at least 5 out of 6 or however many match point teams there were. So many match point teams are on the edge. Like there's a reason why all the teams that are inside Clamor, inside commit spots weren't on match point, and it's not luck. So just a quick overview of what's going to happen in these next few moments. Fnatic and Alliance, they understand something needs to happen between those two before zone closes. They're not going to be able to rotate in together because they're both just going to die and the role's going to 3P. So what ends up happening is Fnatic look for the fight onto Alliance. They pop Hound, they drop down, scan forward, no scans. Recognize Alliance is going to push wide left towards where Aurora is. So Fnatic are going to go and be proactive and make sure they don't waste the Bloodhound, and they're going to go clear space towards Bridge. I believe if there was a team there, which there wasn't in the end, if there was a team Bridge, I feel like they definitely would have forced the fight because that's the type of team they are. They understand like, okay, we're on Bloodhound, like we need to clear this space. If there's a team here, we need to fight this now. No point in waiting 50 seconds and re-engaging with no ults. May as well do it now. So they go and clear that space, which is really good. So here we have a Aurora watching their back. Recognize that they have a team wrapping their back from Civi side. This is going to end up being Alliance. A bit later on into the zone, they just kind of just spent the last like 40 seconds just kind of watching Alliance, making sure they don't push up across the open, try and force a fight. They force them wide onto the right side onto the other side of the rock, which is pretty good. End up getting a knock here on Hackers. I end up getting the finish. However, this whole time, if we ever look on the top left of our screens here, the whole time they're only having one guy just intermittently just kind of jump up off the roof and have a look where Fnatic are. They weren't like full focus on where Fnatic are really, so they're kind of like in a situation where they need to make a decision because their playable spot for next zone is going to be obviously on their ping here, and there's going to be a team coming from this way to take it. Obviously they want to take it, and then I believe DSG are going to try and take this spot here. And obviously that's going to be a 3P opportunity, right? So they need to understand they're in a pinch. and they need to make a play. So they have two options realistically. They can either look for the info on Fnatic rotating. So if Fnatic rotated from Epi towards bridge, once they're up bridge, they can leave one guy on top of roof, watch this way to make sure there's no 3P, and two of them can go commit to this and try and get the wipe. So their full side's clear, so they can only focus on DSG and Fnatic, and they have two teams to worry about. That's it, right? Or they can do the second option, which is to try and force Alliance to go all the way around this side of the rock, and then once they force them onto that side of the rock, they can deal with DSG on that side, whilst they just focus on Fnatic and try and fight for the spot. And there's two teams going for the spot, and they're just, it's pretty much a straight through free. They can either force the fight around here, like around this timing zone. They can force the fight this way and try and block them off from even getting to this side of the zone, or they can kind of just wait and then just wait for zone and gatekeep. Right? That's their two options. So what they end up doing instead is full focusing on this alliance side here and lose track of where Fnatic are, and they get too stun locked on like what's happening over here, and yeah, you'll see. So here we can see Fnatic running in, seeing the 3P happening, 3P opportunity, sorry, happening towards Alliance and Aurora side. They're going to try and cross over to Hill House and try and play for this ping, like I said before. However, they make a really interesting play here. This is something I want to point out. They've been doing this for about nearly 3 years now on international events. No one's really talked about it that much, and I really do want to talk about this because it's really interesting, and I don't see many teams doing it at all. They do this a lot. So they recognize that the team is fighting in front of them here. They recognize that Aurora's here, and they're fighting this way, right? Because they've seen Bangles, they've seen trades. So instead of just showing major presence towards the Hill House, what they do is they full show zero presence behind this rock. So if anyone jumps over from the roof to look towards Bridgeside, they'll see no one. Right before this, Fnatic placed the evac, as you can see here, so they can fake a rotate out as well. So if they jump up and look, they can see the evac, but they won't see anyone here, right? Because they're 3 seconds behind this rock. So it's such a heads-up play in the moment in a Game 8 finals. Zone 4 closing. They're in a decent spot on edge of zone, and the play call to just play super small for like 20 seconds and just show no presence. It's so smart. So if we go back to our raw POV here, about 40 seconds at this point, Fnatic is now behind that little rock here. They are now just showing their presence and is behind the real rock. We're going to play this all the way through from our raw POV. They're full focusing on Alliance, trying to force them around the other side. They have no idea that Fnatic's on that rock behind them. They're all free focusing this side, no one's looking behind. And if they are, they're just jump checking it and not actually full checking it. And I can guarantee you that because of this. Aurora recognize finally that there's a team behind them, but again, it's too late. 17 seconds to zone. They've allowed Fnatic to come way too close. They completely pretty much forgot about the team behind them, and they end up having to pretty much slide down in the open. And yeah, the only thing I would change about this from Fnatic's side is here when they're playing super small and they come out now and start showing presence. I do feel like they could have waited a tiny bit longer because they could have forced Aurora into thinking no one's here, and then Aurora would have slid down. They could have taken Hill House and then shot them down the hill and would have got free entry and maybe took the spot or had a clearer rotate in. But instead, I don't know. I love the play, but I feel like I executed slightly wrong because then they come up a little bit too early. They show presence with the scan before shooting, which is I always dislike. Especially when you're in a surprises scenario, there's no point in scanning. You may as well just, I'd rather shoot my gun before I scan. They do end up having a pretty clean rotate here into their spot, so it's not all bad because they do end up getting this spot and solidifying their spot into zone for zone 5. A quick little recap here is that we can see what happens from the map POV. You can see Aurora pushing up, focusing fully on Alliance here, forgetting about Fnatic a little bit, maybe jump checking here and there, forcing Alliance on the other side of the rock into DSG, but then Aurora end up still being in a pinch because they didn't fully clear either side, and they were so focused on trying to finish the duo of Alliance, kind of forgot about Fnac a little bit. So we'll see in this free frame, see here in this freeze frame, you can see all Aurora POV is looking at in zone, looking left, looking north, and no one's checking for this. There's two reasons, as we talked about. One reason, Fnac really good play, taking the opportunity to play super small behind the rock. Second reason, Aurora focusing way too much on this duo. Once you get a knock, that team is not going to be full pushing you, so you can kind of just full at least two-man look to your right side, make sure Fnac aren't pushing anything like that, whilst one person checks on the duo, make sure you're not full commit anywhere else. But instead, they full three-man commit on the Alliance and jump check on Fnac, and then that ends up costing them as we can see there. So if we let this play on a little bit more, we can see Aurora and the Alliance end up having to slide down for the same spot and end up going down to Moist and DSG collectively. If we have a look at this from DSG's POV, we can see pretty good spot in zone. They get some KP on the Alliance here, sliding down, and then Aurora slide down straight after, get some more KP. In this scenario here, I believe they slightly over rotate towards tower. As you can see, all three are on tower in this scenario. Now, this is a really key part of where I was talking about before. If you go back and have a look, how I talked about if Aurora are in this spot, I feel like Aurora win this game and Aurora win the LAN. If they changed the way they rotated around the map at the start of the game, I feel like Aurora would be in this spot. It would be DSG having to slide down or maybe port down, etc., etc. And I feel like Aurora would have won this game from this point of view. I'll explain. So, here in this scenario, DSG over rotate to the loot. They want loot because they've been pretty much low on meds this whole time. However, this is RC. RC swing left, get angles on DSG behind barrels. They recognize that someone needs to swing onto this rock, right? Someone calls, we need to swing, we have no hard cover. But then no one ends up swinging anywhere, and then enemy goes down. So this simply just cannot happen. They need to recognize that they're in a spot that has no hard cover towards RC at all. Someone needed to be rotating to this rock where they were before and holding this angle here towards where RC were, so they can't swing in, can't do this damage to enemy, and can't get him knocked. Simple. Now, because of this, Design has to waste his portal to get the res to a hard cover back at the rock. Ends up getting the res, but in the end, it didn't matter because the whole reason why I was talking about I think Aurora would have won from this POV is because of the Wraith versus Bang difference. In this scenario here, Design ends up having to try and hold for his teammates across. I believe it's enemy or I think it's enemy who goes down, and then obviously after that you're crawling behind and knocked down into zone. RC play a little bit slow, but they end up getting the wipe anyway. So I'm just going to explain my scenario of Aurora whilst this happens. So if Aurora in this situation here, when RC swung left on the tower that he's shooting at right now, the Bangalore player on Aurora would have simply just smoked the angle, would have been chilling, and would have been able to rotate into the spot with Bangalore, etc., etc., to force RC to play backwards, right? However, DSG could not do that obviously because they're playing Wraith, and they wasted the portal on the res when they should have been having someone on the angle on the left on the rock. So they waste portal, enemy has to go down again because they have no portal to cross to this spot, and then they end up dying because he had no portal to cross, and enemy ends up going down. So that just these really small decisions can win or lose your games, win or lose your LAN events, pretty much. So that's why it's really important from a coach's POV to install these habits during scrims and practices that uh, allow you to have basically be in flow state in these chaotic situations and not have to overthink about these things, and you sort of know it from your practice and you know it from your conversations with everyone. You know what you need to do. There's no overthinking in these chaotic situations. It's all habits. It's all built into your flow state already. So yeah, as we can see here, DSG end up going down to RC as they get the swing. Again, we'll quickly have a little state of affairs. So DSG end up going down. So my quick scenario here is if DSG was Aurora and they were the bang team, they can simply just either smoke off this angle here, so when they swing left to the rest of them, there's a smoke, right? If they then want to push later on in the game, they can simply smoke off this angle, run towards the zone, have this spot, RC's playing here, and it ends up just being a straight 3v3 for the win of the game between those two, right? They couldn't, DSG couldn't force the 3v3 because they didn't have the portal, because they wasted the portal to go from here to here, and they had no portal to go from here to here. Enemy ended up getting knocked on this cross, so then they lost their 3v2. So now we can take a look towards Climber for the first time, and we're going to have a look at Serenity's POV here. So we'll have a look at Serenity's POV. So here we have Serenity trying to make a push on the duo on the right side. They pop blue handle, they're going to go for the push, they nade, they're going to push, and no, they back out the push. So they used blue handle for the push, ended up not going for it because the legacy got weak. But if we quickly have a look back, the timings on this push were not the greatest. As we can see, Legacy's already weak, and these two still haven't even left the building. Boogie hasn't even popped his blood handle yet, and Legacy's already half HP. So if they actually wanted to commit and be decisive on this push, they needed to be way more coordinated, because again, the timings of people pushing is just all off, so they end up cancelling this push. Now they probably would, as you're going to see pretty soon, they're going to be regretting this decision because their blood handle would have been pretty useful later on in the game. So we can skip forward a little bit here towards zone close. They're going to recognize there's a duo on their right, teams on the left, probably a team above them. They're going to recognize that they've scanned the right side, they're going to recognize the duos there, they're going to go swing them, and they're going to kill them, right? That seems fine. However, in my opinion, there's no need to bloodhound scan here because you recognize it's a duo, you know it's a duo from the information you had before. So you're kind of just scanning just to confirm it's a duo. Only the reason you're scanning is to get positioning. But as you can see with the zone, there's no real need to know positioning. There's no other place they can play other than just under stairs or here. And if you just peek it once, you know where they are anyway, right? So this is going to be really important for later because I feel like this scan could have been so much more useful for after the fight for looking for free pieces for that, right? Another thing they do here, they jump down slide, and to my knowledge, I'm pretty sure they used Corsical here as well. I went back and I looked, they didn't use Corsical for like pretty much the whole time they were in Climber, so I'm going to assume they used Corsical in this scenario because they didn't do it later in the game. So with using Corsical on this duo here, you can hear by the ticks, it only really ticked twice, maybe once, maybe twice. Yeah, not really a very efficient way of using Corsical in this scenario. It's a duo, you're dropping down on them. Yeah, I don't think you really need the Corsical in this scenario. It doesn't really do much. It gets about what 20 damage off with the ticks, and that's about it. Could have been really useful for later in the game. So, whilst they're rezzing here, Corsic actually does do a good job of setting barrels up on this blue truck in front of them here, and then climbing up and showing presence on the height, which is really good. The one thing that happens here is for some reason, we check height, and then we keep jumping down, and we just lose information on up top. For this whole time here, you'll see for the next 10 seconds, no one really climbs up and has a look. They're all playing super, super safe. Everyone's playing for just surviving, not really trying to do anything, not being proactive. Like, when there's loads of fights happening in the kill feed, like this, there's 2 fights happening already. Like in this scenario here, zone 6, you need to be looking for stuff. If no one's pushing you, and it's zone 6, and you see loads of fights happening, like why are we being so passive? Like, if we had someone up top still, we can be seeing, okay, the team up top is going to pop blue handle, they're going to run left, right? Okay, maybe we can 3P that and play for third or second. Or okay, if we pushed forward and we played on the blue truck on the right, maybe we can look blue truck on the right here. Maybe we can look for this RC DSG fight. Maybe we can push forward here, and maybe we can scan. Maybe we can scan towards here if we had scan and we didn't use it before. Towards this side or towards the other side, and look for these 3P opportunities. there was opportunities here where we could either push up top and play for third or second, or we can push the blue truck, maybe scan or get a visual info on the fight, and then look for the fight on the three-peat, and then maybe even win the game from this position, right? But what ends up happening is they're too late. All the fights have already finished, and yeah, you can see here they didn't really do anything. Goes down to top three. They're still behind this wall, and nothing ends up happening towards their scenario. They end up having to cross over this wall and just run into the path of a reject, who get 3 kills on this wipe, and they end up coming third because of it. So that's a pretty good point to make here, at least from my opinion. Is why I tell a lot of people is try and always be active. Like, no matter what the scenario is, please don't try and just sit there and wait and just like collect information. It's all well and good having loads of information, but if you're not acting upon it, then there's just no point in having it. Just be active on the map. Whether it's the Aurora play where they recognize that, oh, we're in a secondary spot, so we're not going to rotate away from the zone, loot, and come back later, or whether it's Fnatic on top of Epi, they recognize the alliance is below them, so they're going to have to force the fight. So they drop down and force the fight, right? So they're always active. All these teams are active. They're always doing something. They're never waiting for zone to close. They're never waiting for things to happen to them. They're making the play. They're being proactive. They're doing something, right? It's really important. So we'll just play through the end of this game here. We'll see Reject win this game. Serenity running over this wall. It's 3 kills for RC, and then they end up winning the 3-3 to win the game as well. So whilst this fight's going on and we just show this winning, I want to just quickly talk about the coach's philosophy, because I feel like coach's philosophy, as we're going into like a pretty deep state of the game right now, where pretty much every team in finals has a coach. I feel like this is really important. Coaches need to instate philosophies onto the team, right? They need to build habits onto the team during scrims. They need to make sure that in these chaotic situations on game 8, finals, whatever, like really important situations, that teams aren't getting flustered and they're in flow state. And when they're in flow state, they have all the knowledge they've learned already, and they're not overthinking things. They're not trying to do too much. They just understand the game plan completely. And that's one of the main points that I make as a coach, and I feel like coaches should make, is they need to have massive impact on these situations, like the situations where it's like last game or is your last chance to qualify for an event or something like that. That's where the coach's philosophy needs to be instated into your team, so they're not wavering and they're not overthinking and they're not being indecisive in these scenarios. So that's my whole game breakdown for Game 8 of ALGS Split 1 playoffs. I know it's a bit all over the place. I'm still working on editing and stuff like that. So if you have any recommendations for how to improve that, or any comments or etc., it would be helpful. Or if you guys have any recommendations for other videos that I should be doing, whether it's normal VOD reviews or anything else informative, please let me know. I hope you all enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.